The call came in at 2:47 inches the afternoon on a Tuesday, and I remember looking at the clock on my laptop right before everything went dark. I had been sitting at my desk at the office, finishing up a quarterly report for my manager, when I felt that familiar tightening in my throat that I had learned to recognize since I was 12 years old. I reached into my desk drawer for my EpiPen, but my hand was shaking so badly I knocked it onto the floor. By the time my coworker noticed me slumped sideways in my chair, I had already lost consciousness. My husband was the one who got to the hospital first. He told me later that he had been in a meeting when his phone rang, and he walked out mid-sentence and ran 4 blocks to his car without stopping to grab his jacket. He signed the consent forms. He sat beside my bed and held my hand while they monitored my breathing and gave me epinephrine and steroids through an IV. He called my mother 3 times. My mother picked up on the third call, at 3:22 p.m. My husband told her what happened. Anaphylactic shock. Severe. I was stable, but the doctors wanted to keep me overnight for observation. He gave her the hospital name and my room number. My mother said, "Oh no, that's terrible, sweetheart. We'll be there as soon as we can." They arrived 11 hours later, at 2:14 inches the morning. My husband had gone home by then to relieve our babysitter and put our daughter to bed. He had called twice more to check where they were. My father didn't answer. My mother texted at 9 p.m. "On our way soon, just dealing with something." That something was my brother's car. He had scraped the side of his car against a parking garage pillar on his way home from work. The damage estimate was $240. No one was hurt. It wasn't even his fault the pillar was poorly marked. The garage company ended up covering it, but at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, when I was unconscious on a stretcher being loaded into an ambulance, my mother was in the parking garage with my brother, calling insurance companies and taking photographs of a scratch on a bumper. And she did not come to see me. Not for 11 hours. When they finally walked into my hospital room, I was awake. I was sitting up in bed, eating a cup of orange jello the night nurse had brought me, watching a home renovation show on the wall-mounted TV with the volume low. My father walked in first, looked around the room like he was checking to make sure he had the right address, and then settled into the chair near the window. My mother came in right behind him, kissed me on the forehead, and said, "You look fine, thank God." I was not fine. I had spent 3 hours that afternoon believing I might not wake up. My throat had swollen to the point that the paramedic on the scene had told my coworker it was a close call. The doctor who treated me said that if my coworker had waited another 90 seconds to call 911, the outcome might have been different. But I was sitting up eating jello at 2 a.m., so my mother looked at me and said, "You look fine." The parking garage situation was a whole thing, my father said, settling back in his chair. "You know how your brother gets." I did know how my brother got. I had known for 28 years. My name is Claire. I am 29 years old. I work as a senior software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in Charlotte, North Carolina. My husband's name is Daniel. We have a 4-year-old daughter named Lily. We own a house. We have a savings account. We have a good life, and I worked extremely hard to build it. And for most of that hard work, my family treated it as a resource they were entitled to draw from whenever they needed something. My brother's name is Ryan. He is 32 years old. He has worked 6 jobs in the past 8 years and left each one under circumstances that were never, according to my parents, his fault. He has borrowed money from my parents so many times that my parents, who are both retired on fixed incomes, started borrowing money from me to give to him. I want to be clear that I am not saying this to be cruel. I am saying it because it is the truth. And for a very long time I could not bring myself to say it out loud to anyone except my husband, who had watched it happen from the beginning of our relationship and had, with great patience and restraint, never once said "I told you so." The first time I lent my parents money, I was 23. Ryan had just lost his 3rd job and needed help with his rent. My parents called me and explained the situation, and I sent them $800 through Zelle within the hour. I thought it was a one-time thing. I thought I was helping. I did not understand yet that helping, in my family, was a door that only opened in one direction. Over the next 6 years, I gave my parents money to give to Ryan 17 times. I paid my parents' electric bill twice when they said they were short after covering Ryan's car insurance. I paid for Ryan's security deposit when he moved into a new apartment. I co-signed nothing. My husband put his foot down firmly on that, but everything short of co-signing, I did. I paid and I did not talk about it because I told myself that family takes care of each other, and I believed it even when the evidence suggested that the care only ran in one direction. My husband Daniel asked me once, sitting at our kitchen table on a Sunday morning while Lily was napping, "Why do you keep doing it?" I told him I didn't know. I told him I was worried about what would happen if I stopped. I told him that my parents were getting older, and Ryan was clearly struggling, and I just wanted everyone to be okay. Daniel looked at me for a long moment, and then he said, very quietly, "Claire, when you were in the hospital in college with mono for 5 days, your parents drove up for one afternoon and left because Ryan had a baseball game." I remembered that. I had been 20 years old and running a fever of 103 and so exhausted I could barely lift my arms. And my parents had come to the dorm infirmary on a Saturday, stayed for 2 hours, and left at 1 p.m. because Ryan's high school had a semi-final game at 3, and they had already promised they'd be there. They brought me a bag of oranges and a get-well-soon card from the campus bookstore. They were nice oranges. I remembered being too weak to peel them and leaving them on the windowsill until my roommate came by and did it for me. "You've always been the one who shows up," Daniel said, "and they have never once shown up for you the same way." I told him he was being dramatic. He didn't say anything else. He just got up and refilled his coffee, and we didn't talk about it again until the Tuesday afternoon. Everything changed. After my parents came to the hospital at 2 a.m., my mother stayed for 45 minutes and my father stayed for 20. They said they were tired from the drive. They live 40 minutes away. Before my mother left, she hugged me and said she had been so worried. Before my father left, he asked if I happened to know a good body shop near my house because Ryan wanted a second opinion on the scratch estimate. I said I didn't. He nodded and said goodnight and they both walked out. I lay there in the dark hospital room with the TV still on low, and for the first time in my life I felt something shift. Not dramatically. Not like a lightning bolt. More like something that had been balanced very carefully for a very long time finally tipped over and fell, and I realized I did not have any interest in picking it back up. My husband came back the next morning at 7 with coffee and a breakfast sandwich from the place I like near our house. He walked in, set everything on the tray table, kissed my forehead, and said, "What time did they get here?" 2 in the morning. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay." Just that, "Okay." And we sat together and drank our coffee and watched the sky get light through the hospital window, and I knew that he already understood everything I had not yet said out loud. The doctor discharged me that afternoon with a prescription and a new action plan for my allergy management and a follow-up appointment card. Daniel drove me home. Lily ran to me at the door and grabbed my legs and said, "Mommy, you were at the hospital," in the tone of someone reporting a very important piece of news. I picked her up and held her for a long time. My parents texted that evening to say they were glad I was home. In the weeks that followed, something in me had quietly changed. I did not announce it. I did not send a message or make a phone call. I simply started paying attention in a way I had not allowed myself to before, and what I saw made me understand that I had been funding a dynamic for 6 years that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with convenience. 3 weeks after the hospital, my mother called to tell me that Ryan's landlord was raising his rent by $175 a month, and it was really going to be a stretch for him. She mentioned it casually, the way you might mention that it looks like rain. I said, "That's tough." She waited. I said, "I hope he figures something out." She waited a little longer. I said, "I have to go get Lily from school." She said okay, and we hung up, and I sat in my car in the school parking lot with my hands on the steering wheel, and I breathed. My husband texted me 3 minutes later. He had no idea about the call. He texted, "How are you feeling today?" I texted back, "Better than I have in a long time." A month after that, Ryan called me directly, which he rarely did, because he usually went through my parents. He asked how I was doing. We chatted for about 5 minutes about nothing in particular, which was 4 minutes longer than our usual calls. Then he said he had a small situation. Just temporary. He was expecting a freelance payment that was delayed, And could I spot him $600 just until the check cleared? I said, "I'm sorry, Ryan. I can't right now." He said, "Really? You can't do $600? I said, "No, I really can't." He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and said, "Okay, whatever," and we hung up. He called my mother 40 minutes later. My mother called me 2 hours after that. She said Ryan was really in a tough spot, and she didn't understand why I wouldn't help when I clearly had the means. I said I was sorry he was struggling. She said she wasn't sure what was going on with me lately. I said I wasn't sure either, and I got off the phone, and I went and started dinner, and I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt peaceful. The thing about stopping, I learned, was that no one in my family knew how to handle it. They had structured so much of their emotional architecture around my availability that when I became unavailable, they had no contingency plan. My mother started calling more, which was the opposite of what I expected. Ryan started texting me things he thought I would find interesting: news articles, memes, the kind of small talk that people use when they want to reopen a door they can sense is closing. My father called once and talked for 20 minutes about his garden, which he had never done before. None of them mentioned the hospital. Not once. Not a single one of them said, "Hey, by the way, we're sorry about that Tuesday. We should have come right away." My husband noticed. Of course he did. One evening he said, "They're warming up to you because they need something, not because they realized anything." I said, "I knew." He said, "So what are you going to do?" I said I wasn't sure yet, but I had an idea. My idea came fully into focus 3 months after the hospital, when Ryan announced his engagement. Her name was Stephanie. She was lovely, genuinely lovely, the kind of person who remembers details about your life and asks about them the next time she sees you. I liked her immediately, which made everything more complicated, and also, I realized, made it more necessary, because Stephanie was marrying into a family that operated a certain way, and she didn't know it yet, and someone needed to do something about that. My parents were thrilled. They called everyone they knew. They started planning immediately, which mostly meant they called me with ideas that I understood were really requests. Would Daniel and I consider hosting the engagement party? Their place was a bit small, and we had that lovely backyard. Would we be able to contribute to the catering? Nothing too elaborate, but something nice? Ryan and Stephanie were thinking 60 people. I said yes to all of it. My husband raised an eyebrow when I told him. I said, "Trust me." He said, "I trust you completely, and I am also slightly afraid." I said, "Good." I spent 6 weeks planning the engagement party. I ordered flowers, white peonies and eucalyptus, exactly what Stephanie had mentioned she loved. I hired a caterer who made the most beautiful past hors d'oeuvres and a charcuterie display that I knew my mother would photograph and send to her friends. I set up string lights in the backyard and rented bistro tables, and made a playlist, and bought a beautiful card for Ryan and Stephanie, and had Lily draw a picture inside of 2 stick figures holding hands, which made Stephanie cry in the best possible way when she opened it. It was a perfect party. 62 people. Perfect weather. The kind of evening that photographs gold. At 8:15, when the food had been eaten, and the wine had been flowing for a while, and everyone was warm and comfortable and happy, I picked up the small wireless microphone I had borrowed from a friend, and I tapped it gently to get the room's attention. People turned. They smiled. They assumed this was a toast. It was a toast. It was just not only a toast. I looked at Ryan first. He was standing with his arm around Stephanie, looking relaxed and happy, and for one moment, I felt the full weight of everything, all the years, all the money, all the oranges on the windowsill that I couldn't peel. And then I looked at Stephanie, who was smiling at me with such genuine warmth, and I knew I was doing the right thing. I said, "I want to tell a story about what family really means, not the version we put in speeches, but the version that shows up in the ordinary moments. Or in our case, doesn't show up." The backyard got a little quieter. I said, 3 months ago, I was taken to the hospital by ambulance with anaphylactic shock. I was unconscious when I arrived. My husband, Daniel, left a meeting and ran to his car and was at my bedside before I woke up. He signed the consent forms. He held my hand. He called my parents. I paused. I looked at my parents across the yard. My mother's face had done something complicated. My father had gone very still. My parents arrived 11 hours later, I said. At 2 in the morning. They stayed 45 minutes. And before my father left, he asked me for a recommendation for a body shop. Because my brother had scraped his bumper on a parking garage pillar. The damage estimate was $240. No one said anything. Someone near the fence cleared their throat. I have been part of this family for 29 years, I said. I love my parents. I love my brother. And over the past 6 years, I have done the following. I reached into the pocket of my dress and unfolded a single piece of paper. I have contributed $47,200 to this family in the form of direct transfers, bill payments, rent assistance, and other expenses. I tracked it because I'm an engineer. I like data. My mother made a sound. I couldn't tell what kind of sound it was. I am not saying this to embarrass anyone, I said. I am saying it because Stephanie is joining this family, and she deserves to know what she's walking into. Not the version we perform for each other at parties. The actual version. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. Stephanie. Ryan is lucky to have you. You are thoughtful and kind, and you make him better. I genuinely believe that. And I hope that you both build something together where showing up for each other is not optional, where a $240 scratch on a bumper does not outrank a person in a hospital bed. I raised my glass. To Ryan and Stephanie, may you always choose the hospital. There was a silence that lasted approximately 4 seconds, which is a very long time in a backyard full of 62 people. And then Stephanie started crying. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep, and she crossed the yard and wrapped both her arms around me and held on. And she whispered into my ear, "No one has ever done anything like this for me." I held her back and I said, "Welcome to the part of the family that shows up." The rest of the party was what you might expect. My mother found me in the kitchen 20 minutes later and told me what I had done was inappropriate and hurtful, and she did not understand why I would choose to air these things publicly. I said, "I chose to be honest. There's a difference." My father stood by the back door for a while, looking like a man who had been asked a question in a language he did not speak. Ryan came to find me just before people started leaving. He stood in front of me for a moment, and then he said, quietly, "I didn't know it was that bad." The hospital thing. I looked at him. "I know you didn't," I said. "Because no one told you. And no one told you because I kept protecting everyone from the truth." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Claire." I said, "I know. We weren't going to fix 32 years in a backyard on a Tuesday evening." But something had changed in his face, something that looked like the beginning of understanding, and I decided that was worth something. My husband found me after the last guests left, when I was sitting on the back steps with my shoes off and a glass of water in my hand, and the string lights still glowing above the empty backyard. He sat down beside me and put his arm around me and didn't say anything for a while. Then Lily came out in her pajamas, her hair still damp from the bath the babysitter had given her, and she climbed into my lap and looked up at the lights. "Pretty," she said. "Very pretty," I agreed. "Mommy, are you sad?" "No, baby," I said. And I meant it. "I think I'm actually really good." She seemed satisfied with that. She leaned her head back against my chest and we all sat there together in the warm night, under the white lights, in the quiet that follows something that has been a long time coming. In the months since the party, things have been different. Not fixed, I don't think they will ever be fully fixed, and I have made my peace with that. My parents and I have talked, more honestly than we ever have. My mother cried. My father said things he had never said, including something that was close enough to an apology that I decided to let it count. Ryan has called me every week since the party, not to ask for anything, just to talk. Stephanie texts me sometimes, and last month she asked if I would be in the wedding, which made me cry in a way that surprised me. I stopped sending money. Not with a speech or an announcement, I just stopped, and when the asks came, I said no, and the world did not end, and my family did not fall apart, and what I discovered was that the thing I had been afraid of for 6 years, the withdrawal of love if I stopped being useful, was not as powerful as I had built it to be inside my own head. My parents still call. My brother still calls. The love is still there. It is just no longer transactional. And that distinction has turned out to matter more than almost anything. My allergist adjusted my medication and gave me a new protocol and a second EpiPen to keep in my car. I wear a medical alert bracelet now. Something I had resisted for years because I didn't like thinking of myself as someone who needed one. Now I wear it and I don't think about it. The same way I don't think about a lot of things that used to take up a great deal of space in my mind. Daniel came home last week and found me sitting at the kitchen table going through some paperwork, and he asked what I was doing, and I showed him the document I was updating. My emergency contacts. His name was at the top, where it had always been, where it belonged. And below his name, where for 29 years I had listed my parents out of habit and expectation, and something I had told myself was love below his name, I had left it blank. Not because I don't love them, but because love is not the same as emergency contact. And it had taken me a hospital bed, 11 hours, and a $240 parking garage scratch to finally understand the difference. I saved the document. I closed my laptop. Lily came running in from the backyard with grass on her knees and something cupped carefully in both hands, which turned out to be a caterpillar she had named Gerald. Daniel made a face and I laughed, and Gerald was relocated gently to the garden, and we had dinner, and it was an ordinary evening. It was the best kind of ordinary I have ever known.